Hello, everyone, and thank you for this invitation to talk with you about what it means to be canonized. This is a long and serious process in the Catholic Church because it's a serious thing to say someone is a saint. But we have a special reason for wanting to learn about this process because Catherine McAuley, whom we all know and love, is actually in this process, and we're walking through this with her. So let me tell you a little bit about what this means and how the Sisters of Mercy are moving through this process with Catherine. This is a long process because it has 4 steps in it, and every step has a task associated with it. And in every step, the person involved gets a different title. So it's kind of interesting to see how it evolves. It begins when a group of people reflect on the life of someone they know, and their reflection leads them to believe that this person is extraordinarily holy and live their life in service of God. And when that happens, they may choose to ask the local bishop if he will introduce the cause for that person. It's the local bishop because the canonization process takes place through the diocese where the person lived. And in this case, it's the Diocese of Dublin. So a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, the Sisters of Mercy in Ireland approached the Archbishop of Dublin and asked him if he would write to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints in Rome and ask them to open up a process, hopefully leading to the canonization of Catherine McAuley. And we call that the cause. So the Archbishop of Dublin agreed to do that. And the Congregation for the Causes of the Saints agreed that it was appropriate and opened the cause for Catherine McAuley. And at that point, she began to be called Catherine McAuley, Servant of God. That's the first step. Involved in that step is the appointment of someone who's called the postulator. If you looked at the Latin root of that word, it means a person who asks. So the person who kind of leads the process from this point on is known as the postulator. And the task of the postulator at this point is to write a document about the life of Catherine McAuley. And it's a biography. It tells the story of her life. It reflects on everything she ever said or wrote. If there's anybody alive who still knew that person, those people are interviewed. And the result of that is a very significant document. Catherine's Positio was 2 volumes that were about that fat. So everything that we know about her is included in that document and submitted to the Congregation for Causes. And when they read and reflect on that document, they make a decision about whether there is enough evidence to move the process forward. In Catherine's case, that decision was positive. And so she moved on to the next step, and her title got changed to Venerable, no longer Servant of God, but now Venerable Catherine McAuley. And that happened for Catherine on April 9th, 1990. She was declared venerable. So the next step, the third step, and this is the step where we are now, has a really significant task and in many ways a difficult task. And the task for this phase is to be able to identify a miracle that we believe occurred through the intercession of Catherine McAuley. Now, what do we mean by a miracle in this case? What we mean is something that is beyond explanation, and it needs to be a medical event. It needs to be a healing. And we look at that healing and examine it, and the physicians involved agree that there is no scientific or medical explanation why this person has been healed. So when we find a case similar to that, we have to gather all of the medical evidence and send it to two doctors from different places, not doctors who know each other, but two different opinions. And if at least one of those doctors agrees that this is inexplicable, then we move on to contacting the bishop in the diocese where that happened and asking him to convene what we call a tribunal. And the tribunal is an experience that brings together everybody who knows anything about the healing that we're talking about, and they are investigated by a group of people. The bishop in that diocese appoints a group of people. One is his representative. One is a theologian, someone who will look at the case from the perspective of theology. And one is a physician who will look at it from the perspective of the medical information. And then there's another person who is the official recorder. So I'm going to stop for a minute and tell you the story that we're working on now. Because about 5 years ago, a story came to us of a baby, a little boy about 15 months old, who had fallen out of his high chair and had a traumatic brain injury. He lived in a small town in Oklahoma, and he was life-flighted to a hospital in Tulsa, where some Sisters of Mercy served on the staff. And he came into the emergency room in the hospital, had almost immediately very serious brain surgery. And the parents were told that he would probably not survive the surgery. And if he did, he would have significant lifelong neurological deficits. The chaplain on duty that night was a Sister of Mercy. And she began to text the sisters in the convent and ask them to pray for this child. So the child went into surgery, lived through the surgery, during which there were several very serious events that occurred. And 4 days later, left the hospital completely healthy. So it was an amazement to everyone. His parents had been told the worst possible news. And 4 days later, they took their baby home. And he's still alive and well and thriving. So that's the case that we took to the Bishop of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he reviewed the case and agreed to hold a tribunal. And everybody, as I said, everybody related to the case, the baby's parents, his grandmother, all of the medical professionals, the doctors and nurses who had cared for him, came before the tribunal and responded to questions that were raised there. The tribunal then had to make a decision about whether this was worth passing on to the congregation in Rome, and they decided that it was. So there was a lovely mass that was held in Tulsa, because the documents have to be sealed with a diocesan seal, and that happens at Mass. So there were probably about 100 Sisters of Mercy there, and a beautiful Mass occurred. And in the moment of the Mass, when they drip candle wax on the document, and then the bishop marks it with his seal, every Sister of Mercy present and the members of the tribunal were invited to come forward and help to seal the documents. So it was a thrilling moment, really. And then those documents were hand carried to Rome and delivered to the Sacred Congregation. Also, another part of this process was that the documents were written in English and had to be translated into Italian. And to find a person who was capable, particularly of translating the very technical medical terminology in the documents, really took quite a long time. And then COVID happened. And so it's only been about a year that we've had the documents ready for review. However, we've gotten some good news recently, which is that Catherine's cause is rising up in the pile of causes to be considered, and it's likely to go before the tribunal very soon. So what will happen then? It will be a repeat of what happened in Tulsa. There's a group in Rome called the Consulta Medica. They're all physicians. They will examine the evidence. Theologians will look at the evidence and determine whether it's in accordance with our theological beliefs. And the other thing that we have to be able to assert, not only is this child healed, but the healing took place through the intercession of Catherine McAuley. So the fact that the sister who was on duty texted her community and asked for prayers is really helpful in this regard, because we have copies of the text messages and those kinds of things. So the Consulta Medica and the theologians will examine the materials we have sent. If they agree that this represents an inexplicable healing, they'll present this case to the Holy Father, and the Holy Father will either agree or not. If he agrees, Catherine will then be beatified, and her name will change again to Blessed Catherine McAuley. When that happens, I always say these things in the positive. When that happens, this fourth step in the process is to repeat step 3. The canonization process requires that we be able to affirm 2 miracles. So one miracle in the beatification step, which is intended to prove that Catherine McAuley is indeed in heaven with God, needs to be repeated one more time. So we go through the whole thing, identify a miracle, ask the bishop to convene a tribunal, conduct the tribunal, submit the documents, goes through another tribunal in Rome, and then to the Holy Father. And then Catherine McAuley will be declared a saint. Now, here's an interesting piece of information, that since Pope Francis became Pope, in a couple of instances, when someone is presented to him to be beatified, he skips the next step and canonizes the person. Instead of beatifying them and then calling for the 4th step, he says, well, let's just canonize this person right now. So that's what I'm praying for, that when Catherine's story gets to Pope Francis, he'll just move through that 4th step without going through all of the process again. We know that he knows about her because he knew the Sisters of Mercy in Argentina. We have sent him her biography. In the Year of Mercy, 1,500 people wrote him letters asking him to canonize Catherine McAuley. Every Sister of Mercy who has met him has asked him to canonize Catherine McAuley. So it's not like it would be a case he wasn't already familiar with. And we trust that he will receive the information about her with an open and generous heart. What will be the outcome of this? Catherine McAuley will be a saint. And the great blessing of that is that the whole world now will know what we know. And that is that Catherine was a holy woman who served God through her life and who served God's people, the people whom God loves, who is an example for everyone of what it means to love God and to be of service to God's people. So that's what we're praying for. We're praying for the great gift that Catherine McAuley will be named a saint, in order that the world may know her, be inspired by her, and follow her example.